Hello everybody, welcome to Snyder Inc. 2.0, or as I just say, Snyder Inc. We're gonna be doing another Mr. Ballen video. This is the Missing 411. This is part 15. This is top 3 impossible places people were found. These people were found. We'll get right into this. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. Comment any reaction you'd like me to do. Doesn't matter what it is. Any reaction you'd like me to do, as long as it's appropriate. Any reaction you'd like me to do, down in the comment section. We'll get right into this. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Let's go, let's go, let's go.
Hundreds of people go missing under baffling conditions in the woods of North America every year. One former police detective named David Paulides has begun investigating these strange disappearances in his incredible book series called Missing 411. You can find the links to that in the description below. Today we're going to be looking at 3 of his cases that, even amongst thousands of strange disappearances, these rank as some of the most bizarre. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel, because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please do a trust fall with the like button, but when they start to fall, just walk away. Also, please...
I've had people do that to me. That fucking thing hurts afterwards. If you trust fall, you do that, yeah, it fucking hurts. I'm telling you, you might end up fucked. Don't do that to someone.
Please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Alright, let's get into today's stories. May 14th, 1950, 2-year-old Jackie Copeland was playing with his 3 older sisters at a picnic in Pleasantville, Pennsylvania. This picnic was for Jackie's father's company, so there was lots of parents and lots of other kids there, and it was located on this hillside that was right up against a very swampy forest.
That's a weird place to do a picnic, I would think. That might just be a meat place thing, no? Just do it in a park. You have a park, there's no parks nearby? There's no park. Just do it in a park. What do you mean? What the hell? Also, I always find it weird when companies do that company picnic thing. I don't know if that's just a thing that I don't see, but like I've never seen that in my life.
Jackie's parents have been keeping an eye on Jackie and his 3 sisters while simultaneously trying to have conversations with some of the adults. And at one point, they got so sucked into a particular conversation that for a little while they were not looking at their kids. And when they finally stopped talking to this person and turned to look, Jackie was gone. In a panic, the parents rush over to the daughters and they ask them, where's your brother? Where's Jackie? And they say, oh, we don't know. And the parents turn around and it's just a sea of people and other kids and it's just chaos. And so Jackie's father just yells to the group, I can't find my son. Help me find my son. And so very quickly, the whole picnic starts looking for Jackie Copeland. After about 15 minutes...
I do like the fact that in all these stories, once the person is chaos, they're just screams, they're like, I can't find my kid! And everyone just immediately stops what they're doing to go look at the kid. They're like, okay, yeah, we're gonna find your kid. Yeah, we're good, man, we're good. It is not instant, they're not. The kid just vanishes. How does a kid just vanish like that? How does he just vanish? How is no one watching these kids?
Minutes, when over 100 people looking could not find any trace of Jackie, his parents called the state police. The police showed up in force with bloodhounds and they began looking all around the area, but the dogs couldn't pick up a scent, and they, like the rest of the hundreds of volunteers, could not find any indication of where Jackie might have gone. The assumption was he must have wandered off into the forest, but after being in the forest and looking around and seeing how difficult it was to navigate, because it was basically just this big swamp, they figured we're bound to run into him here, because he just can't have gotten very far. But that night when the sun went down, they still hadn't found Jackie, and they still had no leads. And so the police and most of the volunteers had to suspend the search until the next day when there was daylight.
That's insane that they're like, there's no way he got around, but yet they can't find him anywhere. Where did this kid go? Where's this kid? Where'd he go, man? Where'd he go? That's insane.
light. And so Jackie's parents and some really hardcore supporters, they stayed out all night just yelling for Jackie and continuing to look, even though it was nearly impossible with no light. The following morning, when the search was picked up again, there was a crew of people that were way outside the boundaries of what was considered the main search area. They were 2 miles into this swampy forest at this oil repression.
I'm also just curious why people do that. Why do people, like, in this narrative, it's always helpful every time, but why do people go beyond what they're supposed to? If the police are like, okay, there's no way he got that far, why do people then go that far? Is it just like a gut instinct that, like, now we should probably go over there just to be safe, just to be sure? Or is it just, they just end up over there? Like, that curiouses me.
Plant. The plant itself was situated on this one stretch of dry land in the middle of this forest, where basically all around it was this impassable, almost moat-like swamp where the water was particularly deep right around the edges. The searchers were not on plant property. They were on the other side of that deep swamp water, just looking at the plant. And one of the searchers happened to notice a child was poking their head around the back of a tree that was right next to the plant. It was like the child was peering at the searchers before tucking itself back behind the tree. The searchers couldn't believe it, and they rushed over to the plant, and sure enough, it was Jackie Copeland. Jackie was sent to a hospital.
How did Jackie get all the way over there, especially if he was in a moat, had to get across a moat-like swamp that he would just immediately just go sink into? If it's deep, oh yeah, you go sink right into that if you don't know, if you're a child. It's like, how the heck do you get around? Ow!
And a doctor examined him and said he just had a couple of scratches on him, but other than that, he was in great health. A local newspaper called the Logansport Press followed up with the Copeland family after they were reunited with their son, and they wanted to know what everybody else wanted to know. How did your son get through 2 miles of impassable swampland onto this plant that even adults have difficulty getting to? In the article, the parents said after they got their son back from the hospital and they got him home and, fed and cleaned up, they asked him, what happened? How did you get where you got? And they would say, although he's 2 years old and he spoke in, child speak, kind of like child gibberish, his story was very consistent every time they asked him, and they asked him repeatedly. And so his story was, they were at the picnic and he was looking into the forest and he saw someone peering from behind a tree at him. And Jackie felt like this person or this creature wanted him to come into the forest. And so he got up and he walked to the forest. And as he got closer to this creature or person behind the tree, they scampered farther into the forest. And so Jackie pursued them. And so as Jackie continued to walk towards this person or creature who kept vanishing farther and farther into the woods, he said he reached an area that he called the Awful Dark. And when he was in the Awful Dark, he said there were all these wild animals around him that he couldn't see that were howling and barking at him, but they wouldn't get closer to him because he was with a giant. And this giant led him through the forest and led him to this plant. While it's easy to discount this story because it's being told by a 2-year-old who does not understand everything they just went through, what's not easy to discount is how Jackie wound up 2 miles away on this plant, which meant he would have crossed a 2-mile stretch of impassable swamp. That's what the police were saying. That's what the searchers were saying. It's not possible for a 2-year-old to cover this distance. So the only rational explanation is Jackie had help getting to this plant. And it's also...
I love the line, though, that thing, though, because I bet this 2-year-old, I buy it. I believe what this 2-year-old's saying, even though it's a 2-year-old. It's a scenario where, because a kid might have gibberish thing and gibberish thoughts, but the kid will remember vividly scary situations that happened to them. They remember it vividly. So that kid, I guarantee you, remembers that clear as day. So I personally buy this child story.
Also interesting to consider the fact that when Jackie was found by the searcher at the plant, he described Jackie as peering from behind a tree, like he was kind of hiding from the searcher. It's the same behavior that Jackie described this person or creature doing to him when he was at the picnic. And so between Jackie's story staying fairly consistent for a 2-year-old and him mimicking the behavior of that person or creature he saw in the tree line, it's led people to speculate that while Jackie certainly may not understand who or what was calling him into the woods, that there's a real possibility that there really was someone or something that was watching Jackie from the tree line and got him to come into the forest.
I'm just curious what it is, and I also say thank God I did nothing to this child, and this child had a few scratches and was okay. Just thank God for that. Number 2, just curious.
On February 7th, 1970, 16-year-old Jeff Haig was hiking along the Appalachian Trail with his Boy Scout troop. Jeff had been a Boy Scout for 3 years, and he had been on similar hikes in the past, and so he was very comfortable with hiking.
Never understood Boy Scouts. I'm just gonna say it. Never understood it. Never understood the point of it. Never. Just not for me.
Camping and being outdoors. The hike they had planned was only about 2 miles long, and it was a beginner trail that was very well marked, and it was broad daylight, so it was a very easy hike to make. About 3/4 of the way through their hike, the Scoutmaster had the group stop and sit down and take a break, and Jeff wound up being the last one to kind of make it into this rest stop. He had kind of fallen behind the group. He looked tired and ragged, and the Scoutmaster asked him, are you okay? Do you need food? Do you need water? And Jeff would say he's just fine, he's just a little bit tired. And so after a few minutes, when the group was getting ready to stand back up again and start hiking again, one of the senior scouts was not done eating. And so they asked the Scoutmaster if they could be the last to leave the site and meet up with them farther down the trail. Scoutmaster said that was fine, we're pretty close to the end of the hike anyways, and so we'll see you in a few minutes. And so Jeff, the Scoutmaster, the rest of the troop, they all get up, they start hiking down the trail, while this one senior scout stays back to finish eating. After only a few minutes of walking down the trail, Jeff once again began falling to the back of the line until he finally stopped, and he called out to the Scoutmaster and said, he's not feeling great, he's going to sit down in the middle of the trail and wait for the senior scout, who he knew was still eating at the rest stop. He said he was going to wait for him to catch up with him, and then he and the senior scout would walk together the rest of the way. Now, at this point, the Scoutmaster's thinking they're only about, 5-10 minutes from the end of the hike, and so he didn't want him to sit there, but he figured, okay, he's tired. The senior scout's
So the Scout Lot Master logically has a right to think, okay, you're 5-10 minutes in the way. I think you can make it. But he also has, logic should go, okay, well, clearly nothing's gonna go wrong. He's 5-10 minutes away. There's a guy coming soon enough. Let him just sit there, frig it. I could see why both scenarios would happen.
It's going to be coming through this really well-marked trail any minute, so not a big deal. And he told Jeff, no big deal, we'll see at the end. And so the Scoutmaster, along with the other scouts, makes their way to the end of the trail, which comes to an end in a parking lot. They turn around and they just wait for Jeff and the senior scout to come out of the trail. A couple of minutes later, the senior scout emerges, but there's no Jeff. And so the Scoutmaster goes over to him and he says, where's Jeff? And the senior scout is like, what? I didn't see Jeff. I was alone, and then I walked down the trail, and I didn't see anyone. And so the Scoutmaster's like, Jeff was sitting in the middle of the trail, maybe a couple 100 meters away from you. He was waiting for you. And the senior scout says, no, I didn't see him. And so in a panic, the Scoutmaster and the rest of the scouts ran back up the trail.
Well, yeah, because if he's not there in a well-visible trail, that means something happened that made him go off that trail. The question was, what made him go off that trail? What made him not want to be on that trail anymore? Where did you go, Mr. Jeff? Where'd you go?
Because it wasn't that far to get back to that rest stop, and they're looking for signs of Jeff the whole way, and there's none. At the rest stop, they turned around and were yelling for Jeff the whole way back down to the parking lot, and again, they didn't see him, so they hopped in the van they had left in this parking lot, and they drove to the park headquarters where they informed Park Services that they're missing one of their scouts. The Park Service immediately sent teams out to the area where Jeff had gotten lost, and they called the police, who sent out a whole nother crew of people to assist in the search. Considering how well marked the trail was, everybody was baffled that Jeff could get lost so quickly and so completely. Luckily, Jeff had a pack-on that contained warm clothes, a sleeping bag, food, water, and matches. And so they're looking around, and there's snow on the ground, and it's already starting to snow some more, and they're thinking, he does have basic survival skills, and he's got some supplies. He should be able to survive on his own out here for a couple of days if we can't find him. Over the following week, despite hundreds of people out looking for Jeff in this area, They couldn't find him, and making matters worse is the temperature was plummeting every single day to the point where every night was well below freezing. On the 16th, almost exactly a week from...
How did someone survive in that? Like, I hate coldness when I live now. I live in Canada, Ontario, Canada, and it just sucks, bro. But yeah, it's like, what the heck do you live now, man? How do you do this shit? How do you do it?
When Jeff went missing, they made a big discovery. They found his pack sitting on a rock in the middle of this icy river, where the only way it could have been placed on this rock is if he was standing in the water, which would have been at least waist deep. And even more strangely is all the contents of the bag had been pulled out and placed neatly on the rock, as if someone was taking careful inventory of what was inside. And it didn't look like anything was missing. Although at the time there was no good theory as to why the pack was where it was and why it looked the way it did, what basically everyone could agree to at this point is, now that Jeff does not have his supplies, he's almost certainly dead or going to die soon. And sure enough...
That is true. If he doesn't have his supplies, he most likely will die in that forest. That's just the case for almost anybody. But why did he leave his stuff?
2 days later, Jeff's body was found approximately 1,000 meters upstream of where the pack had been found in the river. Jeff was found sitting up against a tree. His jacket was unzipped, his pants were unzipped and pulled down slightly. He did not have a hat on, he didn't have gloves on. He had removed his socks but put one of his boots back on. His body didn't have any scratches on it and he didn't have any broken bones. It was determined he died from exposure. So with Jeff's discovery, there were naturally a lot of questions.
Yeah, so what the hell happened? So, okay, so we do have a scenario where one person did die, but what the hell happened? Because this is some weird... That's a weird way to be found, man. That's a weird-ass way to be found. What the hell happened to this dude?
The first one being, why did Jeff wade into an icy river and place his pack on a rock and then take everything out and lay it out on this rock, only to then abandon his pack and walk 1,000 meters upstream and sit down at a tree and start taking his clothes off? And even if he had a good reason to leave his pack and go upstream to that tree, he would have known that if he doesn't go back down to get the contents from in that pack, he was going to die. His legs weren't broken, he could walk, but he didn't. He sat at the tree until he died. And regardless of the pack mystery, why did he leave the trail in the first place? The last thing he said to his scoutmaster was he was going to sit on the trail and wait for the senior scout to finish eating and come meet him. He was not indicating that he was going to go anywhere. He was actually saying, I'm going to be right here. So there's nothing about his behavior that indicated he wanted to voluntarily leave the trail. Yet, based on what they saw, it looked like as soon as his scoutmaster turned around and walked down the trail, Jeff must have hopped up and ran off the trail and jumped into the river and taken his pack off and ran up to the tree and taken some clothes off and sat down and slowly died. Now, of course, none of this makes any sense, unless you consider an alternative theory put forth by people involved in the search, and that was Jeff was abducted. In that moment of time when he was sitting on the trail and his scoutmaster had walked away and the senior scout had not finished eating yet, so had not seen Jeff yet, while he's sitting there by himself, somebody was in the tree line watching Jeff, saw this moment of weakness, and rushed up and took him. That theory does explain a lot of the strangeness around the scene where Jeff was found, but it requires someone to abduct Jeff for no clear reason. They weren't even interested in Jeff. They brought him down to the tree and then were just kind of curious about him. They didn't physically harm him. They kept him from going anywhere, and that ultimately harmed him, but there were no marks on him. He was not attacked. And then after he passed, or shortly before, they just took his pack and were rifling through it and putting it on the rock and looking at each piece inside the pack, but they didn't take anything. They left it where it was.
That sounds like an alien thing if I ever saw it. I'm sorry, but that sounds like the most alien thing I have ever seen. That is all my explanation is. It was an alien. That's the only one I can come up with.
And then they vanished. But what kind of a person is just hanging out along the Appalachian Trail, randomly abducting people and toying with them as if they're a child toying with an ant?
Aliens. Next one. Adrenaline in my soul. Sorry. Song's taking me. Go.
In 2006, 38-year-old Corey Kelly contacted his good friend Jim Naprud to see if he wanted to go grouse hunting with him. Grouse are a type of game bird. Jim agreed, and the pair decided to meet at the Red Lake State Wildlife Management Area in Foretown, Minnesota, which was not far from where either of them lived. So the two men, along with Jim's dog named Sammy, arrive at the campsite on October 16th. They get out, they start setting up the campsite, putting the tent up, getting all the food laid out, and that's when Jim realizes they did not bring gasoline. So he says to Corey,
Oh no, you can't have no gasoline. You can't have that. No, 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 no. You can't have no gasoline.
Going to go into town and get some gasoline. Corey said he would stay back and continue setting up the campsite, maybe go out and get some firewood, and he would look after Sammy while Jim was gone. When Jim pulled away from the campsite, he turned and saw Corey carrying a shotgun with Sammy by his side walking into the woods. And so Jim assumed he must be heading into the woods to go grouse hunting. An hour and a half later, when Jim came back to the campsite, Corey and Sammy were gone. Now at first, Jim wasn't concerned at all. He figured Corey was still out grouse hunting and that he and Sammy would be back any minute. And so Jim hops out of his truck and he continues setting up camp. He goes out and gets some firewood. The whole time he's kind of looking around the woods, waiting for Corey and Sammy to, make a sound or show themselves, and they don't. And as the sun...
Well, that's not good, because now that's longer and longer that they're disappearing into a forest. Gotta go get someone, man. Gotta get someone. Damn, I couldn't imagine what it'd be like if you're in a forest and you're waiting for someone to return and the person isn't returning and you're like hoping so bad. I can't imagine it, man. Can't imagine it at all.
Sun goes down, Jim's starting to feel a little bit more worried, and so he gets his phone out and he tries calling Corey, but the cell phone reception's so bad he can't place a call. Jim knew Corey was extremely competent in the outdoors, he was an avid hunter, and he knew this area really, really well. However, he thought it is possible he could have gotten turned around while he was out grouse hunting, and so I should signal where the campsite is. And so for several hours, Jim honked his horn and flashed his truck's lights in hopes that Corey would see or hear him. Finally, after midnight, when Corey and Sammy had not returned, Jim decided, you know what, I'm psyching myself out. I'm sure they're fine. They'll be back in the morning. I don't know what happened, but...
He's waiting too long. He's waiting too long. He's trying to... I know what this is. This is the guy trying to convince himself everything's okay. I understand this. But he's taking too long before making this decision. And he should be contacting people currently. He should be.
I trust Corey can handle himself. So Jim falls asleep, and very early the next morning when he gets up, he's looking around hoping he's going to see Corey and Sammy. They're still not there, and so Jim begins to search the area himself. Jim walks 2 miles into this forest that's very thick, it's very swampy. He sees no sign of Corey or Sammy, and he's yelling for them. He's trying to call Corey on his phone, but there's no reception. And so he turned around and walked back to the campsite, now trying to dial 911, but even that wasn't going through. It was a total dead zone. And then luckily he saw some campers that were out near his campsite, and he asked them to try calling 911, and their call did go through. The police show up and they begin searching this forest, and they find almost right away that it's so difficult to walk in this forest because of how swampy and marshy it is that they have ATVs brought in just so they can do a basic search of the forest. And for
How did this guy get and the dog get through then? It's so hard that for the searchers to get through, they have to get ATVs to do it. Is this guy more determined than they are, or is this just a scenario where the person just happened to, it just so happened to be that way before the guy got on it? I don't know. I'm trying to figure out why the person who went missing, the Corey, and this dog could go missing, but the searchers could walk through the swampiness with ease, and the other guys can't.
2 straight weeks, they looked everywhere in this forest for Corey and Sammy, and there was nothing, no sign of them. Then on October 25th, 9 miles away from where Jim and Corey's campsite was, 2 hunters found Sammy wandering around the forest. And she was hungry and dehydrated, but overall she was in good health. And so they tried to get...
So they found the dog. I have a feeling, though, that they're not going to find Corey.
...her to track to wherever Corey was, but she wasn't doing it. At this point, the focus of the search was...
Well, she probably ain't a track dog. She's probably a normal dog. It just can't do that. And also, if she's dehydrated and she probably ain't able to now.
shifted to where Sammy was found, and they began searching that area, and 3 days later, they found Corey's cigarettes and his lighter. The following day, they found Corey's overalls, socks, and sweatshirts, now 14 miles from where Jim and Corey's campsite was. But even after finding all these things that belonged to Corey in a relatively small area, they looked and they couldn't find Corey. And then the weather started to get really bad, and it started to snow in the area, and they had to postpone the search. The search was started up again in mid-November, and they brought out all these scent-sniffing dogs, and they searched that area near where all his things were found for 13 more days. But again, they couldn't find anything. And then another wave of bad weather came in, and they had to postpone the search again, this time for the whole winter. They began looking for Corey for a third time the following year on April 28th by flying a plane over the area where all of his clothes had been found, and they were able to spot Corey's body. He was laying right in the middle of the swamp, right in the middle of the tall grass. It was determined he died of hypothermia on the first night he went missing, which means he had to have run a mind-boggling 14 miles through this forest before winding up in the swamp. And if you were...
I'm about to say, he died of hypothermia the first night he went missing. Like, what the hell? How did you get 14 miles that long? What? That baffles me even. There's no way. There's no way someone went 14 miles. No, and not, no. There's no way.
Remember, on the very first search for him, the police were unable to just walk around the forest because of how swampy and wet it was. They had to bring in ATVs just to look around. And so the idea that Corey was able to run 14 miles in this swampy forest seemed impossible. In fact, that's what the searchers said. It was impossible unless you were being pursued. If you think your life is in danger, you will do things that you cannot do unless your life is in danger. Adrenaline makes it that way. Lending credit to the idea he might have been pursued by someone or something is where he was found. He was found in the middle of the swamp, in the tall grass. There was a hard, packed path about 15 feet away from where he was found that he could have very easily gotten to. But he chose to be in the swamp, in the tall grass. So you got to ask yourself, if you were in Corey's position, and you had the choice between standing in knee-deep water in the middle of a swamp in the tall grass where there are other dangerous predators in the swamp, or you can just stand on a path and be safe, which would you choose? Well,
Path. Unless something's chasing me. But then again, I still wouldn't go in the swamp and stay by the swamp until something came, whatever, I'd be just trying to get across through the swamp to find another land to keep going. Like, I wouldn't stay in the swamp.
obviously you'd choose the path under normal conditions, but if you were trying to hide from someone, you might choose the tall grass. The last time Jim saw Corey, he was walking into the woods with Sammy carrying his shotgun. But when they found Corey in the marsh, there was no gun, and in fact that gun was never recovered. But they did find an expended shotgun shell casing basically along the path they think Corey took to get to the marsh. He did have his cell phone on him, but from what I read, it looked like either he didn't use it or he just never had any service. Corey's death was ruled an accident, even though many people believe it's far more likely he was being pursued by someone or something, because it's just not normal human behavior to, in the middle of the...
I mean, that is possible, but in the end of the day, he ran into a swamp and got hypothermia. He's the one that did. So yes, obviously, they're not going to count murder or anything, and nothing. They don't know what hunted him down, so as far as they know, it's just a mystery. So, I can see why they labeled it an accident.
The night, get up and run 14 miles through a swamp. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's video, let us...
I did not, but I don't look for it. I just listen to your stories and enjoy your stories, Mr. Ballen. What I do. Anyway, guys, thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed it. Hit the like button, hit subscribe button, comment what you think down below. Thank you all for watching this reaction video. Comment any suggestions for reactions down in the comment section below. Again, thank you all for watching, and I will see you for the next one.